Twin. Where have you been? I was thinking about that the whole time. I just be cracking myself up, I really do. But yeah, twin, where have you been? Nobody knows me. Anyway, so welcome back to my YouTube channel. I've been gone. I've been MIA. It's going on about 2 months. I think I left around October. I think it was October 12th when my grandfather passed away from cancer. My grandfather actually, we were told in August, like my life really came to some type of halt in August. And I felt like I was fighting for my life since August. But knowing me, I'm very much a fighter. I'm very much determined. And like my friends do tell me, my friend wrote in one poem, "The girl that gets back up." And I was persevering and pushing through, but it was like so many obstacles. It was doors being closed in my face for what I wanted and the shift in my career that I was hoping to get, which I do have a testimony for coming soon. And then my grandfather. And so I came home one night in August, around the end of August. I think it was after I learned of, or after I celebrated that week of having, I'm over here spacing out looking elsewhere. Sometimes I blink. But after I celebrated 1,000 subscribers and took myself out to Barnes and Noble, then I went for like some tacos at Taco Craft, or Craft Tacos, I forgot the name of it. And I came home and my mom was like, "Sit down, there's some things that we need to talk about." And I was like, "What's going on?" And she was like, "Your grandfather has cancer." Now, mind you, and it was liver cancer. Mind you, I wasn't telling anybody this. I didn't say anything to anybody but the people close to me. And I was asking them to pray for me a while ago because he was having issues with his gallbladder and he was in the hospital for a few weeks, and we went to go visit him, and then the doctors were going to do surgery, but he was so frail that they were like, "Honestly, we don't think it's a good idea. We don't know if he's going to make it. Right now, we're just going to monitor him." And so he started getting better. He was looking good, feeling good. He was happy. He was driving my grandmother to work. And he was better because we were visiting him all the time. And I was always going with my mom and things like that because my grandparents lived in their own place. We always tried to get them to move in with us, with my mom, but they never wanted to. And so we were always just visiting. And then when he went back for his checkup, and I think they were gonna, because they told him they would monitor him, and then after 6 weeks they would see if they were gonna do the surgery. And that's when they were like, he has stage 4 liver cancer. And I think for me, the world kind of just stopped. I remember coming home, and when I found out, going straight to my room and just crying. That's all I could do. I was so shocked. I didn't even have the words to say to God. I finally understand when people be like, they don't even know what to say. I was stunned. No one in my family had ever gotten cancer. None of us we've never gone through something like this before. We've never experienced this type of loss. Grandfather definitely was the GOAT. And we just didn't know what to do with it. We were in shock. We were crying. We were sad. To be honest, the family was going through a time of depression. And this was since August. Ooh. Am I crying? I'm not gonna cry. Actually, I'm not gonna cry. And the family was going through a time of depression to the point, oh, my nose is turning, to the point where like I would come home and I would be home and my siblings would come from school, and the house just felt so dark. Everything just felt so sad and gloomy. But we were praying and we were hopeful, and I was like, no, God's gonna save him. And had everyone praying. I hate this new time with the sun going down because why? But yeah. And so we were praying, we were hopeful, and yeah, I obviously it didn't turn out the way that we wanted. And so leading up to after we found out, praying hopeful, he didn't seem like he was getting worse or anything. He was actually fine. Mind you, we found out the end of August. Like, we're literally a week later about to go into September. And he was okay, still taking my grandmother to work, still eating the foods that he wanted. And he didn't want to do chemo. He said, you know, I don't want to be weaker than I already am. If I'm gonna die, I want to die looking like myself, you know, being myself. And so he did not want to go through that chemotherapy. And we wanted him to go through it, but we understood. And he did die the way that he wanted to. He did pass away the way that he wanted to. And so life keeps moving, you keep going on, more bad news after bad news. We had my sister-in-law grandfather had passed away. She went to go to the funeral. Then my brother's dad ended up passing away 2 weeks after each other. And then literally after that, it was my grandfather. And the week that he was getting weaker, in October, that week of October 12th, and he was in hospice, and he was, you know, we were in his house, all of us, all the nephews, nieces, grandchildren, whatever, his daughters and son, we were there, and he was in hospice. And I mean, it was so, I've never experienced something so devastating in my life. Out of everything I feel like I've lost in the past 4 years in this transition season that I've been in, I feel like I could care less about it, as long as I could have at least kept my grandfather. So that week was a really, really, really tough week. None of us had never ever witnessed something like this before. We never had a death so close to us. The way that my grandfather was with the family, for many of us, he was our father figure, our father, because, you know, some of us didn't grow up with one. Like myself, my father passed away when I was just shy of 18. And so it was just devastating. I remember the screams when we, you know, I remember praying that like 2 days before he passed, and believing that it was going to be what was his name in the Bible, who had a few days to live. And then the prophet told him, you know, pack up your house, clean up, and do this and that. And I remember thinking to myself, like reading that scripture, my whole family was there and visitors. And I remember gathering everybody come inside. And I'm reading the scripture over my grandfather that he's going to have more time. And I'm praying over him. And the next day we found out, or the 2 days later maybe, that he was having the death rattle, which means in less than 72 hours he's going to go. Mind you, we were there at the house every day. We packed clothes, we slept over, just because we didn't want to miss a moment with him. And I remember in the middle of the night when we did have that sleepover and everyone was over, that he woke up and he couldn't recognize anybody. And he thought his daughters, my mom and her sisters, he thought that they were strangers trying to do something to him. And so he started fighting them. And they were like, okay, play worship music. Even my grandmother, he couldn't recognize. And they were like, play worship music, because he's going to respond to that, because he loves Haitian worship music. And so they played it, and he started remembering. And it was so sad. And then I think 2 days later after that, and then the death rattle coming, that day he got the death rattle, he was gone at around 12:30 a.m., October 12th. The screams were something I've never heard from my family. My aunt fell, my mom fell, my grandmother fell, my cousins fell, everybody fell. I was a little distraught. I was distraught, but I was trying to help my mother, but my sister was taking care of her. And I just remember feeling sick, like I was gonna throw up. And he was waiting for my aunt, because we knew that he was gonna go, but he was waiting for my one aunt, his daughter, who was coming from the airport from Indiana. And once she got there and she opened the gate, his eyes was closed for like the whole day. His eyes did not open. And he couldn't speak to us that week. He couldn't really speak. And so for at least 2 days he wasn't speaking. And then for like a day and a half, his eyes was closed. And as soon as she came and the gate opened, his eyes opened, and he looked at all of us one last time. And then he took his last breath. And I remember the funeral, whatever car, whatever, the guy coming to pick up the body, and just how distraught we were. I just could only describe it as such. It was the worst experience of my life. And planning the funeral, and then the funeral, and my friends were here for me, and I think that's what's been getting me through it. And also remembering the fact that my grandfather was a man of faith, and thanking God that I did have the opportunity to grow up with my grandfather. I lived with him, I would say, most of my life, because I mean, from the time that I could remember, I was living at my grandparents' house. My mom was, my aunts, and then we're cousins. Like, we were all in this one house together in Fort Lauderdale. And so we grew up there for a really long time. I think it was like until middle school that my mom, my phone is dying. It was until middle school that my mom took us and moved us out of there. But then my grandparents, this year they moved up here with us because they were in Fort Lauderdale, and he passed away. And so now my grandmother's living with us, and it's really cool. It's fun. She's been trying to get me fat because she stayed cooking, and she's like, "You want some? You want some?" And I'm like, Grandma, these chubby cheeks are getting a little bit bigger. Let's calm down. But I can't say no, so I'm like, and I'm struggling. But we wanted them to live with us for such a long time, and they were like just very independent. They want their own space. And she's still working, my grandmother, because she doesn't want to stop. And we tell her to, but she's like, which is fine because she needs that distraction now. So that's kind of what life has been like, navigating some grief. We've had 3 deaths in the family, from from August to October. Three. What comes first? August, September? Yes, September. From September to October. And they've just been a few weeks apart from each other. And I just found myself being so upset with God, and the way this year was going. And I had to figure that out. But I did have my friends with me. I did have people praying for me. I did have people from my church just checking in, contacting me. And I just want to say a shout out to my friends, Sashoy and Maisha, who, Sashoy took me to the library. I had some deadlines, and my girl took me to the library, got me my favorite foods. And then Maisha and her took me to the beach for like a picnic, and the winds were beating us down, okay? But I've had just people here for me, and those two, my lovely friends, my girls, they have just been here throughout all of it, throughout the questions of moving back home in January, and God, was this really your will? And throughout me leaving my career as a teacher that I didn't announce, but here it goes. Through so many ups and downs, and there's, to me, been more downs this year than there has